On a cold November evening in 2009, the quiet Utah town of Payson was about to become the center of a storm that no one saw coming. Inside his secluded home sat Kay Mortensen, a 70-year-old retired BYU engineering professor. To neighbors, Kay was the kind of man who had lived a full life of work, church, and family. A man who guarded his property almost like a watchdog, protective of his space and deeply private. But that night, all of that changed. Police received a frantic 911 call. On the other end of the line was Pamela Mortensen, Kay's daughter-in-law, her voice unsteady, reporting that Kay had been attacked. Her husband, Roger, Kay's own son, could be heard in the background. When officers arrived, they found Kay in his bathroom, his throat brutally slashed. It was a scene of pure horror. Blood pooled across the tile floor, signs of a struggle scattered throughout. At first glance, this didn't look like some random home invasion. Whoever had carried out the attack moved through Kay's home with purpose. There were no signs of forced entry, and Kay's fierce protectiveness of his property made it unlikely he would have simply let strangers inside. No, this seemed personal, and immediately suspicion began to shift toward the people who had discovered the body, Roger and Pam. The couple's stories wavered. Little inconsistencies crept into their retellings of the night. Roger claimed he'd gone upstairs, then returned to find his wife on the phone with 911. He remembered declaring, almost flatly, "He's dead." For detectives listening closely, that lack of emotion raised red flags. Then came the polygraphs. Both Roger and Pam were tested, and both were flagged as deceptive. Of course, polygraphs aren't exactly science. They don't prove guilt, but they do crank up the pressure. And in this case, they pushed the spotlight even harder on the grieving son and his wife. Investigators dug deeper. In Roger and Pam's home, stacks of unpaid bills turned up. Debt was piling on them. And Kay Mortensen wasn't just a retired professor, he was wealthy. He had millions, and Roger stood to inherit a share of it. Suddenly the police had a working theory: financial motive. The media picked it up fast. Headlines painted Roger and Pam as the prime suspects in a shocking patricide. Their faces appeared on TV, their names whispered across Utah County. The narrative was building: a son, desperate for money, killing his father for inheritance. Roger and Pam fought back. They hired lawyers. They insisted they were innocent. Pam, in fact, was even offered a deal: testify against her husband, and she could save herself. She refused. Her confidence in their innocence was absolute, but none of it seemed to matter. By July 2010, a grand jury was convened. Evidence was presented and the decision was made. Roger and Pam Mortensen would stand trial for the murder of Kay Mortensen. For the prosecution, it looked airtight. There was no evidence that anyone else had been inside that home. All signs pointed back to Roger and Pam, and yet, beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to show. In the weeks after Kay Mortensen's brutal death, suspicion began to turn inward, toward his own family. The inconsistencies in Roger and Pamela's statements were piling up. Detectives noticed how their 911 call didn't quite match the crime scene, how their stories seemed rehearsed yet clumsy.
Okay.
Sorry, you don't believe?
I'm trying
Does
to.
it sound too rehearsed? Or,
Yeah.
okay.
Is your husband capable of killing somebody?
I need to get a drink.
I wouldn't hope. I mean, I wouldn't think he is. I wouldn't think that he's capable of killing.
Right here, she either knocked on the door or rang the doorbell. I believe she knocked on the door.
I had this door opened
Okay.
because I knocked on the wooden door. I didn't ring the doorbell. And I said, "Is Kay here?" They proceeded to say he is and said he was upstairs, and they let us in.
The other guy shut the door. I turned around and looked. Somebody was walking down the stairs with a gun in their hand. He pointed at us and said, "You're here at the wrong time. Put out your hand." I cut my wire tie and I cut my wife's wire tie. I said, "Stay here, I'll see if their car is gone." And I got up and I walked up these steps. I looked out the window to where the vehicle was parked and it was now gone. I came back downstairs and my wife was talking at the time to 911 dispatch. And I said, my wife was talking at the time to 911 dispatch. And I said, 911 dispatch.
And how every retelling shifted slightly, like they were grasping for the right version. Roger and Pam tried to defend themselves. They pointed to the bills scattered around the house, the debts that Kay had left behind, insisting that money was not their motive. But investigators weren't convinced. On paper, the picture was damning. Kay was worth millions, Roger stood to inherit a share, and the house had been secured like a fortress, almost impossible for strangers to break into without knowing the layout. By July 2010, the pressure boiled over. A grand jury reviewed the evidence, heard the inconsistencies, and decided Roger and Pam should be charged. Just like that, they were indicted for the murder of Kay Mortensen. The headline screamed betrayal, son and daughter-in-law accused of slaughtering the family patriarch. Roger and Pam maintained their innocence, of course. Still, the walls were closing in. The prosecution was building a narrative, and the couple's chances of walking free seemed slimmer by the day. What nobody knew then was that the real killers were still out there, hiding in plain sight. The case against Roger and Pam seemed airtight, until a single phone call shattered everything. Rachel, the ex-wife of a man named Martin Bond, came forward with a chilling confession. Martin and his friend Benjamin Reddick had told her they were the real killers. Unlike Roger and Pam, Martin had a direct tie to Kay Mortensen. Kay had known him since he was a boy, trusted him enough to open his door without hesitation. That trust became fatal. Once inside, Martin and Ben pulled weapons, zip-tied Kay, and demanded his prized gun collection. Kay, clever as ever, tried to mislead them by showing off a stash of cheaper firearms in his basement bunker, but the trick only sealed his fate. Dragged upstairs, he was killed with a butcher knife taken from his own kitchen, his throat slit in a brutal, calculated act. Rachel revealed that the men had rehearsed cover stories and threatened her into silence, but after seeing Roger and Pam wrongly accused, she broke. Her conscience wouldn't allow it. Armed with her tip, police dug into Martin and Ben's lives and quickly found the cracks. Stolen guns surfacing near Vernal, lies unravelling under questioning, and eventually both men turning on each other, each insisting the other delivered the fatal blow.
Absolutely, 100%, it was Ben.
Who cut his throat? It was Marty. Who cut his throat? It's Marty. Who cut it? It's Marty. Who? Marty. Marty who? Swear to God, Marty Bond.
It was the turning point investigators had desperately needed. After months of chasing the wrong suspects, they finally had the truth. With Rachel's testimony, the case flipped. Roger and Pam, who had spent 5 months in jail and nearly went to trial for murder, were cleared and released, though the damage to their lives and reputations lingered.
To humiliate me, they did. It was terrible.
Yeah.
He and his wife were wrongly accused of killing his father. Today, Roger and Pamela Mortensen broke their silence about their ordeal of being arrested and intimidated by police when they were, in fact, themselves victims of a heinous crime.
We were falsely incarcerated, and that we aren't the people that we were made out to be.
They were at a loss as to what to do, and it was easier for them to blame us than to actually spend the time to look at who could be guilty.
Investigators now zeroed in on Martin Bond and Benjamin Reddick. The men denied responsibility at first, but evidence betrayed them. Kay's missing guns were recovered from Bond's house and buried in nearby fields, and both men admitted being present during the murder, while blaming each other for the killing blow. Reddick eventually took a plea deal, accepting guilt for aggravated murder and kidnapping, and was sentenced to 25 years to life. Bond went to trial, maintaining innocence, but the jury didn't buy it. He was convicted of aggravated murder and handed life without parole. For Kay's family, the verdicts brought closure but also bitterness. Roger and Pam had been wrongly accused, humiliated, and treated as killers before the truth came out. In the end, Kay Mortensen's life was taken not by mysterious intruders or a family plot, but by 2 opportunists he trusted enough to let inside, men who valued his gun collection more than his humanity.